they're quite shy. They can be quite reserved, and they're not outspoken like the Europeans. And so, if you compare the British people to the Italian people, for instance, the Italian people would perhaps have an argument daily or 3 times a day, on the doorstep. They argue with their friends, they debate all the time. But the British people would do anything not to have an argument, And so they are quite reserved in that respect. Stand out from the crowd, you mean in the way they look? Or
I know, maybe in the way they look, when they work together or when the kids study.
Yeah, they're very sort of modest. They
like
do
in
hold
the
back. They're not very. They won't express their opinions easily. They find it hard to express their. Yeah, to speak their mind. Their mind. Yeah. Okay. So the Germans are very direct, for instance. They're very. They're very immediate about what they have to say. And the British people are very, please, would you mind?
Okay. Society spreads and we all become more Americanized. Then the get up and go, money, 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 show me the money is going to become more prevalent in the world as that culture takes over. But, I think that is normally expressed as English reserve or British reserve. And it's more about allowing other people a fair say or a fair go at something before beating them. I don't think it's to say that we don't want to beat them. I think it's to say that we'd like to beat them fairly. And so therefore you don't jump out and suggest that you're the best first. You let other people have a go, and then you send up and see who's the winner. So I think that's more to do with British Reserve. And people envy, I kind of grew up in Canada a little bit, and as such, I think that's people envy is the same the world over. If you're perceived as being confident or secure is a better word to use there. If you're perceived as being a secure person, then people tend to fear you. For what reason, I'm not exactly sure, but it's that lack of humanity. Humanity in its very nature is insecure, and so to show that you are secure is showing a lack of humanity in a way. And I think that's some of why people don't wish to perceive or to put themselves forward necessarily as the leader. But it depends on circumstance for me. If I look around at a group of people I'm with and I see I'm clearly best at doing something, then I'll just stand up and say, look, I'm best at doing this. I need to do it. Kind of thing.
Okay.
And I think that also feeds into that reserve thing, because if you stop and take stock honestly of what your own abilities are, then for the group to succeed, it may be necessary for you not to take the lead and to let other people stand forward and use their abilities to succeed where you may not. And that's a judgment call, of course. It depends on how well you know people, etc., etc. And because it depends on how well you know people, and this being a small country, I think that prevalent view of being reserved in order to let the most and the best succeed became culture, or became cultural. There's other things as well that I think, years ago I used to think it's the weather, in that we can't go outside a lot in this country, because of the weather. It's either too cold or too wet. Yeah.
What's that related?
Well, I think it is related because it means we have to socialise inside, and because we're socialising inside, the relationships are a lot closer, or a lot more, not necessarily closer, but they're more on top of each other. It's harder to have an individual voice when you can't just walk away from the group.
Okay. Good to know.
So I think northern countries have that. Where almost the further north you go, the warmer the people become.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying it's true in all cases, or even as a generality.
Might make sense. I don't know.
I think that I think there is something to it though, where those countries that socialise outside have a different perspective on the group as a whole.
Okay. Good to know.
Those that socialise inside because of bad weather, etc.
Cool. Okay. I think British people, as a culture, as a community, generally does try to step back from the world as a visible force in comparison to a lot of other cultures, a lot of other people. However, I think they still impact a lot of people. They still have a fascination, mostly due to the history behind the British culture, the British people. We have a lot of history, we have a lot of good and bad history. And I think some people do still remember that, some people do show that within themselves, where they come forth and they do put themselves out there, put themselves into the world as a whole. But I would certainly say it's not one of the most proactive, maybe, to the global community. But I think if you said to anybody, do you know what British means? Do you know what people in Britain means? I think they would say yes, but at the same time we've had such an influx of people from around the world that the British people, if you like, are made up of so many other cultures at the same time that the question is possibly more, what is British, as opposed to it has changed. I mean, over the last 100 years, so many different cultures have made their home here. You've got many sort of Indian, African, European, Eastern European cultures, as well as Asian cultures, all making their home here. And over the generations have become very much part of the British community. So to say what is British, I think is now a case of who is British more than anything else.
Okay, thank you.
So when people, like especially in class, if people are studying, I think kind of you have a few people who are generally quite confident, so they'll be more outspoken, would participate more, and then so they're not very afraid to interact. But then I think you get a few who, I don't know, I think there is a lot of there's a few kids who would love to stand out, but then there's some who are sort of much more withdrawn because they don't want to be considered like a geek if they know too much, or they don't and then there might be others who don't want to seem like they're not clever enough. And I think you do have a lot of stereotyping in schools and university and everything, so the people who are like really clever are sort of like cast as one type of person. And I think depending how confident the person is depends what kind of group they become. If they're less confident, then I think they kind of just become sort of geekier group who just keep themselves and do really well, whereas the more confident ones kind of don't really care how they come across, and they probably generally the less clever ones, and they sort of hide behind confidence a bit maybe. But I think it's very sort of, it's all quite mixed up. It sort of depends, I think, on personality a lot, whether people are comfortable to show that they know a lot or not. If that makes sense. So yeah.